Right, got the Falcon 9 launch profile up here. We're only interested in from the fairing separation on. Not interested in the booster. We just want to see what happens here, according to SpaceX, regarding the satellites when they're released from the second stage rocket, okay? Which is this information up here on the top right. Once the fairing is separated from the second rocket, the second stage, I should say, we then get SECO, which is second stage engine cutoff. Once that happens, you then get payload separation, which essentially will be the satellite releasing itself from the rocket. Okay, just to give you some idea of SpaceX's template for putting satellites into space. And at that point, just before release, we should supposedly have something like that. A satellite with its fairings off, exposing the satellite to heliocentric space, attached to a second stage booster. Or something similar like that, okay? And of course, a lot of the times we get the camera on the booster, the rocket, looking up at the satellite as it's released into heliocentric space, okay? So that's generally what we're looking at when we get these SpaceX satellite releases, okay? So we got SpaceX's latest satellite release, hot off the press. And of course, let's set the scene, let's play the video. Remember, we're going to be viewing it from the camera. So we're on the second stage booster, right? In space, looking up. Of course, the fairing is separated. There's nothing else around us. Just the rocket, the camera on the rocket, and the satellite. The camera on the rocket is looking up, okay? So let's have a look. Get ready for separation.
Payload deploy confirms.
We get separation. And as a result of separation, we are going to have bubbles coming from everywhere, particularly from our right-hand side. Lots of them, I may add. Now, the heliocentric believers will say this is ice crystals. Now, I'm going to say to you, where are these ice crystals coming from that coincide with this satellite release? If it's just here, a rocket booster and a satellite in space, nothing else, no space stations, nothing else attached to this, where are all these supposed ice crystals coming from that are coordinated seemingly with this satellite release? Look to the right of the satellite now. Hundreds of bubbles rising up to the top of the pool. Look, it's a bubble fest. Hundreds of them. So, where, if these are ice crystals, where did these ice crystals come from? And why did they start to appear at the same time the satellite was released? It was almost as a reaction to the satellite being released. So what were these ice crystals attached to? Because they're coming from the far right of the booster. And remember, the booster's on its own in the vacuum of space. So your ice crystals just doesn't cut it. Unless, of course, you just happen to have a load of ice crystals that were passing by when SpaceX did their satellite release. Ridiculous. I'm going to show you exactly what's going on here. Remember, these question marks are where these ice crystals are coming from. Where were the ice crystals? What were they attached to? If they're coming from the far right-hand side of the rocket booster stroke satellite release. This is actually what we were looking at. The camera was at the bottom of the pool looking up at the satellite release. As the energy was transferred from the mechanism of releasing the prop stroke satellite, which was to go to the top of the pool, the energy transferred into the base, along the base of the pool, into another prop or something else. And as a result of that energy hitting that other prop or something else, or the rails, you got the resulting bubbles rising to the top of the pool. There's no explanation whatsoever in the heliocentric model, even if you're going to say it's ice crystals. Where did they come from? There's nothing else around that rocket booster. I've shown you, it's on its own in space. Even the rocket, the Falcon 9 profile shows you it's on its own. This is what we saw. Bubbles coming from a reaction of the satellite stroke prop being released in the pool. The energy got transferred down into the ground to the base of the pool, transferred along the runners or the steel that they sat on into the next prop, which could well have been a section of the ISS they showed for spacewalks. And of course the resulting thing, lots of bubbles then rising to the top of the pool. That's exactly what we've just seen. There's no explanation for it in the heliocentric space. Where did the ice crystals come from? What were they sat on? Why were they coordinated with the release of the satellite? Makes absolutely no sense. This is the only thing that makes sense. It's a joke. All of it. It's not difficult anyway. Let's have one more look. Here we go then. One last time. To see a prop being released underwater and the resulting energy of that prop being transferred across the bottom of the pool to either another prop or something else, and then we get the bubbles going up as a result of that energy transfer. That's all I see here.
Payload deploy confirms.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. If you're going to say ice crystals, what were the ice crystals attached to? Where did they come from? This is obvious fraud from SpaceX, supposedly the #1 space company out there. There's no logical explanation for this other than fraudery, and essentially this is underwater, a setup, and it's pretty much like I described. It may not be exactly in the picture, but it's the result of that energy that's traveling from the supposed rocket booster across the floor of the pool, hitting something else, and then we get the resulting bubbles rise to the pool like here. Heliocentrism is scientifically impossible anyway. Add to the so-called evidence from space geniuses like Elon, and when you analyse it, look at their space profile launches of satellites, look at the footage, it's literally a bubble fest of mockery. Dear, oh dear, oh dear.